Real quick, before we get into the show, I wanted to share a new service called Getita that Ken and I have been using that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?
Welcome everyone to the Firing the Man podcast, a show for anyone who wants to be their own boss. If you sit in a cubicle every day and know you are capable of more, then join us. This show will help you build a business and grow your passive income streams in just a few short hours per day. And now your hosts, serial entrepreneurs David Schomer and Ken Wilson.
Welcome, everyone, to the Firing the Man podcast. On today's episode, we have the privilege to interview Steven Weigler. Steven specializes in the protection of brand, IP, and other business assets. His entrepreneurial perspective building a startup balanced by his role as senior counsel for a Fortune 50 technology company has allowed him to develop the skills required to be empathetic legal counsel. Steven started Emerge Counsel in 2015 with the mission to provide early to mid-stage businesses sophisticated counsel at a lower price point than large law firms. Total TM is his proprietary flat fee trademark prosecution system. He also likes to kickbox, ski, and listen to live music. Welcome to the show, Steven.
Good to see you guys.
To kick off the show, can you share with our listeners a little bit about your background and your path into becoming an IP attorney?
Sure. So I have a pretty extensive business background focused on things that really were fairly complicated. I started out just getting my advocacy skills as being, I wanted to be a big city prosecutor. And so I actually was a prosecutor in Miami, Florida, where I learned just mental toughness and how screwed up the world can be. After having been, I went to school in Colorado at the University of Colorado. And so we moved back here, and I was lucky enough to get at the time, telecom was I was able to get a job in telecom working for AT&T Corporation. And so at that point, if you notice in my career, I was really focused on big entities. I thought, hey, working inside the system, even that before that, I worked for US Congress. So it's everything was inside the system working. And I realized hey, inside the system, you're in a lane. And if you get out of your lane, it's not necessarily prosperous for you in the organization. They like you to, it's not that different than the Army or something. If you're infantry, they don't want you checking out, well, how's the aircraft carriage? So, it's really, I found it kind of exciting that I learned so much about how large corporations handle, especially technology issues. Found it also a little bit frustrating, always having to be in my lane. Anyway, long story short, AT&T got bought by SBC. It's still the same brand. So that's a good study in trademark because the company's not the same, just the name of the company. I got an exit package. I took it. I started a predictive analytics company, did that for 8 years and started it from seed all the way to, we had some bumps in the road, no doubt, but seed to successful sale, built up explaining technology, protecting technology, focusing on running a business, had to raise a lot of money. So I know a lot about investor relations. Anyway, when I exited that, and again, it was the good, the bad, and the ugly. My wife told me, you can't sit in the basement forever. Take what you know, write it down on a piece of paper. Emerge Counsel is a combination of business and IP services focused on the early stage to mid stage, small to medium sized business, entrepreneur, providing, I think, really empathetic, if anything, services because I have a lot of business and IP experience at a lower price point than large comprehensive law firms. And so that's who we are.
So, Steve, I think it's fair to say that you fired the man. You were working in a large organization and then you bet on yourself and started your own business. Do I have that right?
Absolutely. Twice.
We have to pause here and talk a little bit about that. It is the Firing the Man podcast. So can you walk us through what was going through your mind, going into, am I really going to do this? Am I going to fire the man and go out on my own? What were you thinking? What would be some advice that you would give to that younger self?
It's kind of what I talk about in my introductory call, which is always complimentary to my potential clients, because I need to get to know them. Is do they have really the grit, the ability to pull something that's pretty hard to take that leap? And so I just knew that I get really frustrated when I can't truly problem solve. A corporation doesn't generally hire you, especially at a C. I wasn't C-level, but I was, high enough level, mid-level intellectual management, high-level attorney there. They're hiring you to solve a problem, but there's so many guardrails to solve that problem that it's really, and there's so many politics involved that it really doesn't become about solving them. And this is nothing against AT&T. It's the way a large corporation is, an enterprise. They don't need you, or at least they don't think they need you to reinvent the company. Like, it's really like, all right, well, we have this issue in this place. And so I think if you have a sense of frustration that you really want to problem solve and really build something, especially flip it, entrepreneurs don't only problem solve, they build things. And so if you really have that kind of drive, fire in your belly that you think you could do it better, and really, if the guardrails were taken off and you got the creative space to really get from point A to point B, being an entrepreneur is an amazing thing for you. But there's things that come along with it: uncertainty, sometimes self-doubt, a lot of times, building up. Then you have to be open to building up the other skills that it takes to make your company successful. I would say, because I speak to a number of entrepreneurs, especially in the e-commerce space, at least 2-3 times a day. And if they're kind of closed-minded, like if they're like, no, this is the way I'm going to do it, I have this all figured out. I worked at Tires Plus or something, and I know what tires are all about. Then that's really like, I question that if that's the right type of entrepreneur that can really get from point A to point B. Because ultimately, all we want for our clients, and all we want, I think an entrepreneur wants, is to grow a company, either for it could be a cash cow, like, they grow it, they're living off the proceeds of their hard work, or they get to the point that they sell it. It doesn't really matter this is a well-operating company, a well-oiled machine, a well-executed business plan. And so if you get to that point that you're looking for that, you want to get there as fast as possible, or as efficiently as possible, without the follicles of hair that have fallen out of my eye. So the point is that it's really, that's what we're looking for. Not that I'm just a service provider, but that's what I'm kind of see in entrepreneurs that are successful especially in the e-commerce space. They're a little open-minded. They're willing to study about things that they don't know. They're willing to take advice from people that have been around the block many times, or even instructors in it. So again, a good entrepreneur has to be fairly open-minded, but fairly almost stubborn, that they have viable business plan, and that they have the drive and the secrets to get from point A to point B.
Okay. No, I could not let that opportunity pass by without asking you about the Firing the Man Day and talking about those entrepreneurs. Most of our listeners are entrepreneurs, and they either have businesses or are thinking about starting businesses. Can you speak to the importance of intellectual property? What value does that bring to a company? Also, could you comment on types of intellectual property and what people should care about?
I picked the field to especially focus on intellectual property because it's abstract and keeps me stimulated. And also I have a tech background, and then most of it is intellectual property. So the point in intellectual property, if I were an entrepreneur, or I ask an entrepreneur, do you have the cure for cancer? And if they say, yeah, I have a cure for cancer, they're probably not a right client for me, because they need a biotech team, they need millions of dollars, they need to get a partnership with a distribution channel. The point is most of our clients in e-commerce don't have the cure. What is it? What is the essence of what's going to make them? So the point is, if you have the cure for cancer, well, let's have a different podcast to talk about that. But it's not my field, and most people don't have it, and no one cares what it's called. You get the patent, you're going to be really successful, because that's going to solve a world problem. But most of us don't. And so what is the distinguisher? Why would someone buy something of yours in e-commerce more than you would buy something of someone else? And that has to be some elements of intellectual property that make that true. The elements of intellectual property usually that are the most important are brand carry. When you go to the grocery store and you look for cookies, you could buy a knockoff of an Oreo cookie. Now, most of us don't. Why? Because we know it's not like Oreos. I mean, they're very tasty, but it's not like, because we immediately see them in the store. We know what they are. We know that if I close my eyes, and we all close our eyes and we say Oreo, we know that we're talking about two delicious black cookies. They have spin-offs, but the main cookie is, a black, dark, kind of really chocolatey cookie, and some frosting in the middle, some funky design on it. That's an Oreo cookie. And we can close our eyes, all know, even though we haven't met, we're not in the same city, whatever, we all know what an Oreo cookie is. That's great brand right. But Oreo has to protect every element of that intellectual property through trademark processes, or something called trade dress, to make sure that they are the only ones that can distinguish their brand through that. So if you're starting you would be starting a brand on Amazon. It's either going to be a product that has a niche, usually is what I know about most of my Amazons or e-commerce, eBay or Shopify. It doesn't matter. You're not out there trying to compete with Macy's and have, a million SKUs. You have a niche and you have a identified audience that you want to identify with your product. And so that's trademarks protect brands. And so distilling elements of that brand now, because look, Oreo didn't start out with double stuff. And now now it's what was it? I saw it in the store, candy cane flavored. That's how they built off their brand. They started with Oreo. And so, what's your minimum viable products? What products do you think are going to sell? And Amazon itself, if you sell on Amazon, requires you to get something, you have to get on the brand registry, and you have to get on the brand registry by registering a trademark. Otherwise, and there's substantial benefits that come along with that. So the first thing we always kind of look at is what's your brand? What's your minimum viable product? Or if you're, experienced seller, what's selling? What are the elements of that product that need to be protected? It's usually going to be a name. Sometimes it's a logo. Sometimes if you're doing creative work, it could be sound. Like think about on HBO, before any HBO program starts, they have that it's almost sounds like static and then it goes into a little tune. That's trademark. And it can be what's called trade dress. And trade dress is, for example, look at the Louis Vuitton bag. Why do people buy? There's plenty of good bags on Amazon, but people love Louis Vuitton and they'll pay prime dollar. It has nothing to do with the functionality. The Louis Vuitton bag, there's better bags on Amazon, most likely for quality. It's all about the look and feel, the non-functional element, the wrap. So when we close our eyes again, when we say Louis Vuitton, I can picture these brown, algae all over the bag. Looks like a little alligator. That's trade dress. And so that is protected. So trust me, Louis Vuitton doesn't rely on their name or rely even on their name tags as much as they rely on what that trade dress is. So everyone, and depending on what your category is, meaning what you're selling. So if it's cosmetics, if it's handbags, we've done tools, we've done things we've done so many, but everyone has a niche. And so we kind of know, a good IP attorney knows the formula kind of for that niche, that industry when we're coming at a trademark play. That's an important piece of IP. I'll just whip through the other, continue on. Patent is we talked about the cure for cancer. If you have the cure for cancer, patent would be a really good idea. Patent protects either inventions, substantial improvements on the invention. The problem with patent is you're not protecting the actual product, you're protecting the invention that's contained inside the product. And that gets really complicated and very expensive. There's something called the design patent, which protects, for example, the Apple iPad, how those are designed. It's not that they invented how you can hear on your headphones. It's the design of the headphones. The point on that, and the same with the point on trademark, you need a strategy. You just don't. So I get a lot of calls, I file a provisional patent. That and maybe I'm not sure what will work better in the bathroom, provisional patent or the toilet paper thing. No strategy, no game. The third is copyright. Copyright protects original works of art. You can copyright code. So if some of your clients have a code element, it's a really good copy. I think it's a good cheap strategy. You can copyright your product packaging, how it looks. It really is a strategy that kind of fits very well into your branding strategy, really taking a look at the copyright. And the fourth is called trade secret. So trade secret is, I think, hardly underutilized, and it really focuses on the Coca-Cola. They didn't do any patent that I know of. Oh, they did some on bottles and stuff, but the point is formula Coca-Cola, which is their secret sauce, they just kept very secret. So each vendor doesn't know who, if you're selling cinnamon, which I think is in Coke, they don't know that they're not the vanilla vendor. They do things are very secret to make sure that the secret sauce of the product doesn't leak out. So you take those four things together and you integrate it into what we call an intellectual property plan. A lot of times in e-commerce, it's not patent. Trademark really carries we see some copyright and we, identify some pieces of copyright. And trade secret, it when you got it. It's something that I'll identify, but it's not for most people. It's not a secret. It's a brand play, really. And so you have to add, those are the questions I would suggest that your listeners ask. And so that they can do on a free call with us, and we can set them in the right direction. On those four things, over the last years, we talked a little bit about total TM. And what I did is, there's really, in my opinion, there's one right way to file and protect and register a trademark. There's shortcuts. You can go on LegalZoom. There's filing services, and there's attorneys that say they'll do it for $95. But you need to do a full search to see it's called an algorithmic search, and humans can't even really think this clearly, to slice and dice what you're thinking your brand is. So mine is total TM. Say someone has that might at the patent and trademark office, that might hit violating their trademark by filing this other trademark. I mean, that doesn't sound like something that you would think about as a human. That's something that an algorithmic search would help you lead towards. And maybe they never even filed the trademark, but you could be setting yourself up for a big piece of litigation. And the bad part about it is not that you might not win, it's that you might not find out for 2-3 years, sometimes 5. And so you're like busy, like growing your brand, everything. You didn't do this full search. You didn't do the process right. You think all's good because you have this trademark. And the next thing you know, you're facing a cancellation proceeding in a possible court case because they had prior rights and your mark's confusing. So I can't encourage so what we did, and I can't encourage your listeners enough, is really like we all kind of, if you're legit, we all kind of do it the right way. And that includes thorough placement, thorough search, really understanding what your brand is, really understanding the description, what you're using it for, using a lot of software to do some predictive analytics, which includes AI, and then using software to monitor to make sure that we get it through as quickly as possible and keep the registration going, et cetera. So that's our total TM product. And we priced it, to be liberally fair to the entrepreneur. I found out I was losing money. So, but the idea is it's a really good, I kind of productize the process to do a really thorough trademark prosecution.
So 2 follow-up quick questions. So Steven, can you share the price on the podcast, or do the audience members need to set up a call?
Well, it differs depending on the complexity of the application. And why I say that is there's something called it. If you're actually using the mark, it runs about close to $2,000 all in. If you, including the USPTO fees. If it's called an intent to use, well, then you have to prove use later on. And that is like a multiple other steps. So it add about 3 to 5 on average. But it just depends. Like if you're like, well, no, I'm going to do this in 2.5 years, then we have to file 5 extension, explain each time why we're extending. It's like a lot of client communication that, price goes up a little bit.
Yeah, fair enough. So around 2,000 to higher if it's not in use and there's more time for your team.
Yeah. Okay. The big piece when your client listeners are doing apples to apples, they might go on the internet and say, well, that's ridiculous. So this person, is doing it for $500. The full algorithmic search, most firms charge $1,800 for that, because it's number one, it takes a ton of time. And number 2, it's not, the software itself is expensive. And so if they're not doing that, we can file a trademark for you in 15 minutes. We're just not going to, and as a philosophy, we're just not going to do that, because although we make a lot of money when there's litigation, I don't mind it. It's very interesting intellectually. It's not good for them.
Totally agree. And David and I have both in our personal businesses have had issues in the past with IP and, skimping on, this is advice for all the listeners, skimping out on a few $100s to wiggle around something is not worth it for IP, because years later, you're going to pay 10 times or 20 times that, or not be able to use the IP at all. And so I would definitely encourage the listeners to not skimp by on IP and make sure they do everything they need to do on that and on the front side of it. So another follow-up question is you've covered kind of like the four main branches, if you will, on IP protection. And can you describe to the listeners, like say they're e-commerce sellers, they're just starting out, maybe they got a few products on Amazon and they don't have a trademark. What does the roadmap look like for them? And what would be the steps 1, 2, and 3 to kind of start protecting their brand? What steps would you advise?
I think it's important to have a call with an intellectual property attorney to identify their brand. Usually that's not that hard to do. I realize that it's like the name of my sweaters are Kitten. Okay, Kitten sweaters. But really, and then make sure that we're not going to see any carnage when we're working up the process. Amazon IP Accelerator and the brand registry now, as soon as we can get the trademark filed, you get a serial number and you can get on the brand registry. So there's no real competitive advantage. We do compete on price compared to Amazon Brand Accelerator. That's just my personal view. But the combination is so we can do the same thing. We can get the trademark serial number within days of engaging. The search takes about 2 to 3 days, and identifying the brand takes next to no time, and getting a search opinion takes, we're talking about a week, and you'll be on the brand registry and I look at it like you have to look at your trademarks as phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1 is just the brand. What's your master brand? What are you going to call it? Like Adidas, that's the master brand. Now Adidas might have 50 brands, 100,000 brands of shoes. The first one is you got to get the major brand. And so maybe that's, and I also think that the logo, I'm kind of anti-trademarking logo if it's an early stage entrepreneur, because I think, this comes to marketing, but brand experiences change. So you have to test the marketplace a little bit out. We see logos change, and you're filing a trademark for what it is. You can't be like, oh, I changed it a little. They're like, well, the USPTO is like, well, too bad, so sad. That means you're not using the first one that you filed. That's canceled. And the second one, file a new application. We want to talk about that a little bit and put it in our back pocket, but we're really looking, tier one branding if it's an initial consult. So just identifying it, getting Mark on the brand registry, and then we have lots of experience on the brand registry on how to explain it to the Amazon folks. Keep it organized. The entrepreneur is not spending all the time corresponding with the brand registry doing it wrong.
Agree with you on the benefits of brand registry. It used to be something that you would do to set yourself apart. And now if you're a serious seller on Amazon, it's just about mandatory and to be competitive. And so I definitely agree with you there. Continuing our conversation about e-com, what are some violations that you're seeing right now in the intellectual property space within e-commerce? And what can sellers do to avoid those?
Well, we're seeing the biggest threat we're seeing, and that's a really big one, is knockoffs, counterfeiting from China. That takes up about half my day every day dealing with the issues. Now, there's two ways to look at that. It's your product is getting knocked off, or as bad, Amazon groups you into a group of products that they say are counterfeiting, because there's some really big companies out there that are relatively ruthless, just putting down every potential competitor, going to the courts and taking you down. It goes back, my experience and my thoughts are, it goes back to the very beginning. Identify some distinguishing, you could be selling, there's got to be some distinguishing element of your clipboard, which you can identify, which makes your product unique. Speaking with experienced counsel like me, I can tell you what the potential, how something like that would be knocked off, and what you can do to brand your product, like maybe heat seal the logo, or, create a creative logo, heat seal it into the product. And then if we hit it to distinguish the product. And so part of it just becomes at the IP plan, because a lot of these, the one I'm working on right now, the products were relatively generic. And the next thing you know, there's a seizure of all these products because some big company said, everyone, maybe more than that, 750 infringers infringed on this product, and they just put together a list, but they won't show anyone the list. So you just have to figure out that because Amazon took you down. But if you can't distinguish what's unique aspects of your product, you can't get off that list, because it looks like Amazon has a product, the person saying that you counterfeited has a product, and you have a product, and they look an awful lot alike. So really distinguishing your product from the very beginning is crucial to both fending off the infringers and not being on the infringer list yourself. The second thing is, this is not, when you get into this area about like what are the issues in intellectual property, this is not, you might say, Steve, I get it. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Sounds like you're a good intellectual property attorney. But I think I could do this myself. It's like, it's just, I saw clipboards, and it's clipboard under Smith. So, go for it. So they're like, do it yourself. This is, once you get into this area of like Amazon said I infringed, or I see infringers, this is not amateur. This is like as complicated international law as it gets, maybe the war in Gaza or something. But the point is this is not amateur hour in international law, because, usually the infringers in a foreign country, if you're on that infringer list, they're accusing you usually of operating out of a foreign country or supplying in a foreign country, which theoretically a lot of my clients have done, meaning they order the product from China. And so really, if you have a strategy at the beginning, it's going to be much easier to work that out, because this is kind of a mid-stage problem. If you don't, we're looking for elements of your intellectual property that could distinguish your brand and really be able to explain to a court or Amazon, which many times acts as a court, why those other products should be taken down. We also work with partners from search companies that can identify the extent of the problem, meaning they can run searches that none of us can run, that aren't even ASIN related, and really tell who your infringers are, and initiate much more than me sitting and writing, 1,800 letters, write takedown notices and monitor counter notices. So it's kind of like, that's something that you should call an attorney immediately. It's kind of like if your heart taking it in the mouth and your heart starts murmuring, well, you don't go to WebMD, you call it a doctor, really. It's not time. It could get a lot worse, a lot quicker. It could be nothing, but it could get, a lot worse, a lot quicker. And when you're sitting, in the stretcher with a heart attack, that's not the best time to say, God, I should have called that doctor then. So it's not that different, meaning it's like this product, you start seeing like an infringer on Amazon or anywhere, you're probably looking at the tip of the iceberg, like there's something going on. And yeah, that sucks. we can hold virtual hands and commiserate. Happened to a lot of my clients, but it's not the time to shy away and hope that, put your head in your hands and hope that this is just an anomaly. It might be, but usually not.
So that's interesting. You said about half of your time is spent on that type of stuff. And so, yeah, I suspect that won't go away as Amazon is growing and more sellers are coming on and competition is more fierce. Kind of have to battle for your real estate, and then everybody is copying everybody. And so interesting. I'd like to pivot into, it seems like in the last year or so, every podcast episode, we talk a bit about AI. It's hitting pretty much every area. And so I'd like to pivot a little bit into AI. We've got some projects going on in our company, and I know a lot of it, I would say most e-commerce sellers are actively using AI now. And so I'd like to cover a couple of topics with AI. And I suspect it's probably a newer-ish space for IP law. Maybe AI is not, maybe it's been around for a little while, but in terms of images and videos, those are the two main things that we're using. We're using it a little bit on code, but mostly on images and video and also copy. And so let's say, for example, we have an active project in our company right now. We're generating AI images for a project. Can those AI images be copyright?
So it's a really good question that the courts haven't fully fleshed out. Most recent guidance and I'm just trying to think what circuit it was. So the United States is separated into various circuits. And so like St. Louis is a different circuit than Denver. So each circuit has their own say on kind of this. But if it's completely generated by a computer, the answer is no, because it's not an original work of art because it wasn't created by a person, is the general guidance that I've been seeing out of courts. Now, if you modify it or you put inputs in, like I want a purple dress fairy, 2 red horns, if you start putting some creative human element into it, the verdict's out. I think that would be considered protectable. It's a really challenging area of law right now. Not so much. So then you got to look at it like this way. And I certainly do, is wow, what an amazing, I get so many of the same I'll just tell my personal. I get so many of the same trademark questions. And so I love, my whole practice is based on building real, legitimate, meaningful relationship. If you can't build a meaningful relationship with an attorney, you probably not a great experience. And you're probably like, God, that's the last person. Someone like me, I want to help someone get from point A to point B and be there when they're at point B and sell the business. And that requires a tremendous amount of building relationship. But still, I get the same questions all the time. And it's like, I could do them in my sleep. So I'm using AI now to answer the questions. And then I'm going to take them and put my own custom spin on the questions based on the information I'm getting from AI. And I think that's how you really have to look at it. I know, when you get into hardcore legal, there's attorneys here in Colorado, there's to happen in New York, they write their briefs on AI. The sites that are generated, a site means like where would it exactly say this? So a court could check out if you're not bullshitting them. Well, the sites are being made up and the attorneys are getting disbarred. So I don't think courts are particularly favorable on AI. I think, and ultimately they really, I guess, do matter because it's like you're talking about intellectual property. Who's going to decide? I think there's kind of sour on AI. So I think everything with like a little grain of salt. It's an amazing tool. It's going to give you ideas. I look at it like the encyclopedia on steroids. It's going to give you amazing ideas. It's going to give you amazing thoughts. And you take those and you customize them and you make them your own. And otherwise the market's probably going to kill you anyway, because anyone else can go and get that description. But I know I've been cranking away on these questions. It's been great. Otherwise I have to sit down and think about well, here's what this case says about it, or here's what the legal encyclopedia says. How do I explain that to a consumer? Where it's much easier with AI. I think it's tremendous. Just take, just like the next step, put your own personal spin on.
So just to follow up or finish up on this piece, an AI generated image or video or whatever, as long as you're crafting it like inputs and you're kind of guiding it into what you want it to create, you think that is, depending on which area you live in or which district or whatever circuit, it'll probably be able to get copyrighted.
I think the argument is no different than Adobe Illustrator or Adobe InDesign. But, the other question is, look, and this is some brain scratching question, is look how AI was developed. It was developed by dumping a ton of data into programs, and then it's pulling from the data that was. So the question is, well, was the data that was put in there, was that copyrighted? And that answer, we don't know. You have to do some real good investigation on it. And so part of it is we'll submit it to the Copyright Office and see, but part of it is those are the types of cases that are coming up when an artist is like, well, this was copyrighted. I see it in chat GPT, and then the next thing you know, it's like somebody used it out of chat, and then the next thing you know, they're getting sued. So you just have to be very careful, It's like this, just like why I can price it where I price it. It's like we use really sophisticated software but we don't cut corners. That's the balance. Like, so if you're going to, this is your logo, for maybe a little more combination, due diligence, and we can do logo searches easily, customizing it and using AI as an idea. But that's, I think, the issues.
Well, I know we've talked about Emerge Counsel at different points throughout the episode, but at what stage of entrepreneurship should people be getting in touch with you? What type of clients do you work with? And if there's any services that you offer that you haven't commented on, could you chat about those?
Actually, I have to finish it, but I'm writing an ebook the ebook is about everyone that starts a business has a goal. And it's really encourage entrepreneurs to look at what's your end goal for this business? Is it, do you want to make $1 million a year? Do you want to exit? What's your end goal? And really work from the back to the beginning is like, all right, so the first stage is always to organize properly. So, for example, a lot of people are like, well, I just need to form an LLC. Okay, well, that might be true or it might not be, but your organizational structure, there's a lot of variables and really it's something to talk out, but you talk out kind of having an idea of what your end game is. And so if it's you need to raise money, well, don't do it. My initial advice without building more, don't do an LLC. Like that's going to be a nightmare. And then converting the LLC to a corporation. So really there's various stages and various points where you need specific legal advice on certain things, because that's the time you should be thinking. If you think you do have the cure for cancer or patent play, then we should be done with that very early, because you can't release the product. If you think you're going to be selling internationally, really talking about the international brand protection strategy early on is an important piece. If you're talking about we talked about tiered branding. If you're talking about tier 1 branding, well, you would think about that at a certain time, tier 2 branding at a certain time, tier 3 branding at a certain time. So anyway, I've outlined all these kind of steps for the business and the IP steps. And if I were an entrepreneur, which I guess I kind of am, when I would think about that, and then the carnage that happens if you don't think about it at that particular time. But I think, organizational structure is hugely overlooked at the beginning of the business. Everyone's like, well, LLC, the state I live in. Okay, well, why do people, the question is, well, why do people do it other ways? And they do it other ways because there's tax benefits. It's going to be hard to undo that if you're bringing on a partner. So just kind of thinking out what you think about business. Is it a solopreneur thing? Are you going to need to raise money? Are you going to have partners? Is there debt? Is it convertible debt? All these things that we have to think about at various stages. Now, there's also a mantra, we'll just get started. And I agree with that one too. Meaning you could sit around and cognitive freeze, where you're like, well, that's a lot to think about. So that's the point, is like even talking to an attorney or really even reading this ebook when it comes out, you don't have to do this all at once. It's just kind of thinking about strategically what the issues that we see in growing a business, so we can avoid. It's much cheaper doing prophylactic work and avoid the issues. Kind of let's just go for it and we'll worry about all this later, having to fix it. And sometimes it's not fixable, or it's fixable, but it's like threats of lawsuits and things that make it fixable. So the idea is really, again, to look back, find out what kind of entrepreneur you want to be, and then move towards it with legal planning. When I talk about legal planning, ultimately, most of my clients want to exit at some point. And so I do some M&A, and we are always thinking about what the due diligence is going to look like at the M&A. You would be 1 in a million if you didn't have due diligence coming after they give you this kind of term sheet offer letter that, the valuations have been looking good, but the M&A can be really tough. What it starts out at is, well, gosh, it's a $15 million valuation or whatever. The next thing you know, it's like, oh, you didn't add this partner to the operating agreement, and you didn't do the distributions right. Well, we can't. That's not something we can do. $2 million off. Wow, you didn't protect the tier 2 branding? Most companies would do that. $3 million off. And so it starts going down quickly. And so really we want to start at the beginning. And I find that the most rewarding thing about my practice is when I can work with an entrepreneur to get from point A to point B usually being the exit, without carnage. And so that's really my practice and strategy. And then we package a lot of it. So it's flat feed. So the entrepreneur is not worried about prices going through the roof.
Fair enough. I've got a ton of more questions, but to be respectful of everyone's time, we're going to have you back on the show, Steven, and talk about due diligence and exiting and M&A and all that fun stuff. Every show, we run our guests through the ringer. It's called the Fire Round. Are you ready? It's a series of short questions, quick answers. What is your favorite book?
Right now it's Sapiens. And I like Sapiens because it's like why it's just an anthropological book about the history of humans and why sometimes we get in disputes, why we're programmed the way we are. And it's been really interesting to me because a lot of times, like attorneys especially can spin wheels, and it's really, but you have to understand how humans are conditioned in a way. So it goes all the way from prehistory to now. It's a pretty easy read. I found it so profound. Why there's religion. I mean, just huge questions.
Yeah, I love anthropology. I'm going to add that one to my list. I haven't heard of that one. What are your hobbies?
I love to work out, which is mostly I started kickboxing, but it's now I'm working out with mixed martial art trainers. And so just doing weights and stuff. I mean, I'm never going to be a mixed martial art fighter, but just, working out with really intense people and pounding away on weights. I love to ski and I love hanging out with my family and I love listening to music and I love the Denver Nuggets.
Awesome. What is one thing that you do not miss about working for the man?
Don't miss. The worst part about my job was if they said, like, at the time I had a young family, and if they said, go, like, there's a meeting in Minnesota tomorrow morning at 9:00, there was no debate. You were just going to drop what you're doing and get on a plane. You're really you're not captain of your own ship many of the times. Of course, I found it a very congenial, nice people. I'm still friends with a lot of them. But as far as like your life being your own, it just wasn't. It got really trying to the point where they thought in Minnesota, they thought I lived. And I mean, I'm from the Midwest, but I'm not moving to Minnesota. Too cold.
Fair enough. So yeah, controlling your own time. That is...
controlling your own time and your own destiny.
Last one. What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
I've thought about this question a lot. It has to be focused. A focused entrepreneur usually can get from point A to point B. What does that mean? That means they create their own systems. It doesn't have to be someone else's system, but own ways of keeping to the task at hand, overcoming issues. So it's really a tenacity / focus that I see in these types of entrepreneurs. Sometimes they can be the more mellow ones, like they can let things brush off them, but they are focused on the goal. They're not running off and saying, hey, this is going pretty well. I think I'm going to go and film a movie in Ecuador. They're really super focused on the task at hand. They have long-term goals. They have short-term goals. They're focused.
Steven, I want to thank you for being a guest on the Firing the Man podcast. If people are interested in getting in touch with you or Emerge Counsel, what would be the best way?
Sure. So, again, we offer consults because we want to get to know people and their business plans and see if we can help them. It's Emerge Counsel, COUNSEL.com. And my email is SWEIGLER@Emerge Counsel. And then I'll send you a link or on the website, you can set up a consult.
Well, very nice. And we will post links to that in the show notes. Steven, thank you so much for your time today and looking forward to staying in touch.
A pleasure. You guys, happy holidays.
Before you go, we wanted to share a new service that Ken and I have been using called Getita that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida.com, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?